Welcome back to the Injury Prone Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Edwin Porras, Doctor of Physical Therapy, Medical Analyst, FantasyPoints.com. Gracias por tus oídos. Hey, I wanted to hop on real quick here and talk a little bit Malik Nabers and talk a little bit about DeVonta Smith. Two guys, two wide receivers dealing with soft tissue injuries, trending in the exact opposite direction. We know that Malik Nabers has been struggling with a quote-unquote groin injury. I'm doing the finger quotes for the podcast audience. And that was in week 12. He initially came up with the groin injury in week 12, Nabers did. And since then, he's been fighting through it. But then again, during practice this week, now they're calling it a hip flexor injury, which if I had to guess, they're either directly related or they're the exact same injury. This is considered a soft tissue injury. The worst version of it is what we saw with Jamar Chase a couple of years ago in 2021, I believe, where he had an avulsion fracture. And all that, and he was out for several weeks. I don't think that's necessarily what we're dealing with here with Nabers, but I don't think that we're going to see him this week. And I definitely, I would make plans to be without him over the next 2 to 3 weeks, which is into the fantasy playoffs. The second question to all of this is Nabers going to put in the effort that he needs to and come back at less than 100% like most players do, or is he going to take his time and really rehab? Either way, it's his prerogative, but given the state of the Giants organization as a whole, would not be shocking to see Nabers out for the rest of the regular season. I think on the worst possible end, I think best case scenario, this is like a 1 to 2 week injury. Nabers is back here probably week 16-ish, but we'll see what he decides to do. Next guy, DeVonta Smith, trending in the right direction, but still slight re-injury risk that we have with DeVonta Smith after this hamstring injury. What we know is that the Eagles are not extremely, but relatively conservative with their injury management, especially soft tissue stuff. We saw this exact thing with A.J. Brown earlier this season, had a hamstring injury. They managed it pretty well, and he's been okay since then from a hamstring perspective. So I would anticipate DeVonta Smith steps into his usual role, or at least something really close to it, and he's able to put up the same numbers that he usually is, especially with Dallas Goedert out this week. So the only thing with DeVonta Smith is we want to see it before we throw him into any cash games. These soft tissue injuries can always stick around, and this is something that Smith's been dealing with for a couple of years now. He's been on the injury report on and off with this specific issue, so we do want to see it before we slide him into cash games or anything like that, but he's perfectly fine for tournaments. All right, that's it for today. These have been pretty short this season, like I've said, but if you really want a full breakdown, go to FantasyPoints.com. The injury reviews and injury previews are up there for free, FantasyPoints.com, or you can listen to this podcast. Guys, honestly, I'm not as active on X or Twitter these days. I am, I don't know what the Blue Sky handle, I don't even know how to say the Blue Sky handle, but it's FB Injury Doc. Go follow me on Blue Sky. But I'm not on either of those platforms as much this season as I'm growing this physical therapy business in Denver. As much, but I promise you the most accurate version of my takes, #takes, are on the podcast and the injury reviews and previews over at fantasypoints.com. So if you want my takes, go over there, check them out there. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Blue Sky at FB Injury Doc. Good luck this week.